It's this edition of Through the Gears presented by Front Stretch. I'm your host, Tino Pattigno, and I couldn't be more excited to get back into the NASCAR racing and betting action for this weekend's racing action from Dover Motor Speedway, the Monster Mile. We got a monster show with monster values packed out for you across the board from a NASCAR betting standpoint. In this one, I'm super excited to get into everything we have there, as we'll be bringing on Ryan Stevens from WinTheRace.info. And Win the Race can provide you guys with tons of great things when it comes to NASCAR betting. They're P1 in racing analytics. They have NASCAR betting and DFS strategies for you guys to follow along with, true performance ranks, front runners, and especially the Sim Center. All of that and more, will break it down for you. That Ryan and his team has built that site, and it's been awesome to be seeing what they've been doing there from a content perspective, and also the edge that it is able to give you guys in order to win the race. So without further ado, before we get into Through the Gears, I got to give a special shout out to my man Kyle B8, who commented on the last video, and he continues to do so each and every week. I love talking with him and discussing some NASCAR questions he has, or comments, or just anything about the racing in general, or about the video that you guys want to see. I appreciate him. Appreciate Mr. Hartman, Mike, and Noah for tuning in, as well as they continue to follow along as we go through the gears. And if you guys have any questions, comments, or concern, feel free to comment below. I'll be sure to get back to you with that as well. So now let's go through the gears. Joining us now as we go through the gears, previewing everything for Dover Motor Speedway from a betting standpoint, everything in between as we get set for the race weekend, is Ryan Stevens from WinTheRace.info. Ryan, thanks for joining us, and how you doing?
Doing great, man. We just got done with the NASCAR betting preview show. Excited for Dover. One thing that we said that I am excited about is, we don't see another drafting track until, I think the last race of the year. So we got 3 to 4 month stretch here of no drafting tracks. So yeah, ready to get back into, our more typical races that are more predictable.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to NASCAR betting, is finally having that break from all of the chaos of the underdogs are good from a value standpoint, but we can always find them here at some of these other tracks and everything like that. Speaking of Dega, we'll stick with that now as you get into the recap. How did the race unfold for you guys there? Did you have any of your picks make it towards the end, and how was the weekend overall for you?
Yeah, we have Joe who works with us. He hit the Reddick outright, so that was great for him. I did not bet much. I had about 3 units in just on some winners sprinkled out there. Didn't come through, but that's okay. I didn't go crazy. Back at Daytona, I know I had, probably 15 bets. I ended up hitting Byron to win and lost every single prop. So I just broke even. It was like, what a waste of time. So this time I just did winners, didn't hit one. Oh well, lost 3 units. We move on. I thought the race was okay. I didn't think it was the most exciting. I think one thing that's interesting is you get to the end of these races, these drafting races. The guys say all week, you can't pass in this car, you can't pass in this car. Get to the end of the race, they don't try to make any moves or form any third line until there's like 1 or 2 laps to go. And I just think that's way too late. I wanted to get your opinion on that too. I thought a third line should have formed, 4 or 5 laps earlier, because if you can't pass, then you have to start making these runs and start pushing each other and do what you can. And it just didn't happen. So I don't know. I've also never raced a car, so there's that. But I didn't know what you thought about that.
No, I think that's a good point. We haven't raced cars here. I wish I have, but I
Yeah.
completely agree. I wanted to see a more Talladega super speedway race, like especially how good Atlanta was and everything like that. Like I expected to see 3 wide racing, drivers going at it, fighting. They did fight for stage points, but like you said, that even then it was a fuel mileage race, and then they went and got the stage points there, like. Then they broke apart, tried to do whatever they could with 1 or 2 laps to go. There was no, and I think especially with the Fords being in sort of a line from 1 to 4 on the bottom, and then the 2 Toyotas with Reddick and Martin Truex Jr. at the top, I thought everyone was just committed to pushing. And that was where the problem was. No one, because Ford's now on this continuously on this winless streak, right? They did not want to lose, and then they ultimately did just that. And I think if we would have seen more moves in the race, it would have been better. Like, it wasn't a bad race, but also for being a super speedway race at Talladega, I just feel like the product wasn't there. It wasn't like, I don't need any big crashes. I don't need the big one. I don't need any of that, but I do want a lot of racing. And there wasn't any racing really up until the very, very end.
Yeah, the guys I saw on the outside too that surprised me were you had somewhat of a formation of Cindric, then Logano, then Blaney, and they were on the outside lane. And I'm like, all right, there's like 6 laps to go. I'm like, all right, these guys are going to pop up and people are going to go with them and they're going to make a charge toward the front. And watch, like Penske will be up near the front by the end of this race. And it's just like lap by lap went by and they just stayed in line. I was like, man, they just waited way too long. But yeah, I don't know. Glad to be past it. Dover would be fun.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I'm glad that we are past it now, right? Congrats to Tyler Reddick, congrats to Michael Jordan. Great to see him in victory lane, everything like that. But now, as we get towards Dover, and this is something that I want to, on through the gears here, we potentially have some new NASCAR bettors getting into the mix, learning what it's about. What can they learn from Win the Race and everything that you guys offer there? Sort of promote your guys there and the site and everything that it does, because I know just either seeing your content about it and seeing all the stats that you provide, it's been a huge insight and source to me, everything following along there. So give us a little bit of insight there.
Yeah, for betting, we actually have a NASCAR betting expert, Greg Mathern, who works for Win the Race. He's on Action Network. I think he's got like over 10,000 followers on there, tailing his bets. Very smart people tailing his bets because he's very good at what he does. But he kind of keeps everyone in line. You don't have to tail him, but just listening to his advice, I think makes you a smarter better. And then we also have the Sim Center that Joe Schroeder hooked up with Speed Geeks. So the Sim Center is nice because it actually simulates a race over 10,000 times, and then will tell you what the fair market value should be for each bet. And we have it hooked up to like 5 books now, and all the bets from every book is on there and graded compared to with our Sims. So it's really cool. We had a question earlier. What would you guys bet Bubba Wallace top 10 plus 210? And it's like I looked at the Sims. We have it fair around plus 265. But that's just an example. Someone who's new to betting, you could look at that and say, well, if this thing's been simulated over 10,000 times and there's a lot of good data going into these simulations, maybe I'll stay away from that one. So I think the Sim Center is extremely valuable on Win the Race, especially for a new better, because it kind of is the guide, does all the work for you. And then whatever you do beyond that is up to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the coolest things that I've experienced or at least seen around the NASCAR industry and when the race itself, like being able to see sims or have the data that comes from that. Like I think that's something that is, like you mentioned, super beneficial, and anyone who isn't on that already should get on that. And especially just because of how hard these races are to win from a driver standpoint, but also that goes hand in hand with us betting them, right? You always hear a driver win a race and say, oh man, these races are so hard to win. Well, they're so hard to bet on as well. And that's why we see so much value on the board consistently each and every week. And that's what, to me, that's what makes betting on NASCAR it's my favorite sport, but B, it's my favorite thing to do, right? Because you have so much value on the board, especially when NFL season comes around, NBA season, MLB's here, whatever the case may be. It's like I'm telling all my buddies, like, look, like you got to check out NASCAR because A, it's exciting, but B, when it comes to betting, all of this value is on the board. And for you guys to be able to bring another level of insight to that, it has been awesome. And what has that process been like too, like in sort of creating it and now building up the platform throughout these couple of years here?
It's been interesting. When I started this 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, I guess, last year was the first full year. I'll say that I did it. It was just me. I just did it. It was something where I wanted to create a site when that had all the stuff that I was trying to seek out on other sites. And I did all my own research and work anyways, and ranked everything out and my own DraftKings projections for DFS and all that stuff. So then I just decided to throw it on a site, and I had a little bit of a following from another site I worked for, and just being on X, posting stats and stuff like that. And then it grew to a lot quicker than I thought it was gonna, and then had made some good friends and colleagues in Joe and Greg and Jim, who I've worked with for years on NASCAR data. That's really the team, a 4-man team now, and I'm so glad that they're with me. It's great to be able to offer something for everyone, whether you're just interested in the stats and data, or you want to start betting on it, or you play DFS, daily fantasy. That all that's there too. So it's really whatever you do. We have people too that can't even bet in their state or anything, but they're in a league and they're on the site because they want all the data to beat all the people in their league. So it's cool to see that as well.
Yeah, that's a sweet sort of a mix, and the ability to give people the ability to play and to be a part of the mix there and bet and everything, no matter where they're at. And I think that's especially important too, because like I'm here in New York, right? And I believe you are too, right? You're stationed in New York, yeah. So it's like sometimes we see props that are crazy that are from like other states, and we can't even get to them and things like that. But it's good to have the insights and the data for people that can capitalize on that, because at least they're getting a part of the mix there. So when we get into Dover now and everything like that, I think for me, when I was looking up some of the stats and tracks comparable to that, there aren't really any, right? It's such a unique track. The amount of speed it brings on the type of concrete banked track that we see, that's something that's been interesting for me to sort of experience as I do some prep for this one and have in years past, is the fact that Dover is such a unique track. Is there anything that you've been able to gather for this Dover prep as we get it ready for this weekend that could sort of give us an edge here?
I mean, you kind of hit it right on the head. Like you want to look at steep bank tracks, how fast drivers have been in the intermediate package, because that's what they're going to run here. Same tire code as last year, so I do think you can look at last year's race uh, quite a bit, even though there was no qualifying. But that's okay because you still saw the cream rise to the top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's it. So, like, in my pre-practice and qualifying ranks I put on Win the Race, I actually, I don't normally put a ton of weight on the track. I kinda have everything kinda equal out, all the things that I put into it, like the secret sauce, I guess you'd say, that goes into the rank. But this week, I doubled down on the Dover weight because I want Dover to matter more than anything, how they race here because it's such a unique track. So, yeah, I think the intermediate package and last year in Dover specifically are like the main ingredients.
I think that's true, and I'm glad that you mentioned uh, in that statement there, like the fact that the cream rose to the top, because I did watch this race back earlier this week and finished it here before we recorded today, and watched the whole thing back, and it was interesting to note, like with some of the drivers being up front who shouldn't really have started up front if they did qualify, based off speed and everything like that, because it got rained out. If the cream did right, like all those drivers that were in the back were faster, Kyle Larson being one of them, Denny Hamlin, I know, and Kyle Busch was at the front, and then all the way finished outside of the top 10 there as well. So I think that's important to note here, because I think that shows also that although track position is key, right? Drivers can still, if they have a fast car or if they do not put up a strong run in qualifying, and we know maybe they put up, better lap averages in practice or something like that, that they can get there towards the front of the field. So now as we look towards our odds breakdown, sort of getting into the mix of things here, Kyle Larson is the favorite as usual. That's to be expected, plus 450 there. I'm looking off of DraftKings specifically. I do want to note, obviously, say any of the other books you may have in mind here, or any of the odds as well. It's important for everyone to shop around, and get the best value out there. I'm just going off DraftKings because that's the official sports book of NASCAR, just to sort of base our minds off something here. But then we have Martin Truex Jr. and Denny Hamlin next up. I believe this is going to be a Hendrick Motorsports versus JGR race in this one. There is one driver that stands out in that mix, would be Ross Chastain. But just looking off those three favorites in Larson, Truex, and Hamlin, could you pick out one that you would sort of say, okay, I would choose him over the other two there?
Um, well, I kind of think because Larson is such a heavy, heavy favorite, which I didn't think he would be. I thought like everyone would come out 6 or 7, like all these top favorites. And the fact that he's 450 kind of pushed, Denny Hamlin can be found 8-1 out there, and Truex 7-1. Those would be the two that I'd gravitate toward first. Uh, Martin Truex, especially. I know we'll get into like outright winners in the next segment here, so I can save some of the goods on him. But yeah, the ones that caught my eye here first, Truex and Hamlin stood right out. So did Byron. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's tough because, like you said, it's JGR versus HMS. I think largely this week, with maybe a couple other guys poking their head in there. But as of right now, I'm on the side of Truex and Hamlin. I'm on the JGR side at the moment.
I can be on that side as well, though, because of how much speed they've brought with these new Toyota bodies. Like earlier in the year, and I think that's what's most important, is because earlier in the year, although there's not too many tracks comparable to Dover, right? But we saw at Phoenix, we saw at some of those other tracks that are like that where they're shorter track. Bristol was another one where they're shorter tracks and the Toyotas just dominated. I feel like it was a Truex, even at Richmond too. That was Kyle Larson for the first half, but the second half it was all Martin Truex Jr. and he should have won that race. Denny ultimately ends up stealing it, but still, that's Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Christopher Bell, and Tyler Reddick also were in the mix when we're talking about Phoenix there. I think that's something that when I'm looking at the Toyotas and their new bodies, that's something that they've improved on, and that's where the Fords are lacking as well. Quick, let's touch on the Fords here too, because I think their winless streak just is going to continue on. Maybe they get lucky at a Kansas or a Darlington with like a Joey Logano or a Blaney, but aside from that, what are your thoughts on the Fords being in the spot they're in right now?
Yeah, I think like if you saw Ford pop up, it might be like Darlington, where we get like a high tire wear race, and you start to see these vets like Logano or someone like that sneak in and get a win out of nowhere. Um, Here, I just don't really see it. I can't. Like you said, with the speed that Toyota's bringing in this package, and the same thing with Byron and Larson mostly. I know Elliott did get a win in this package, but he was running 20th until he stayed out and caught the lucky caution to be up there in the top 5 the whole rest of the race. And he was fast, but if he doesn't catch that lucky strategy, he never has a chance to win that race. So it's really just in my eyes, it's Larson and Byron are the two that can mess with JGR here. And again, that's mostly Hamlin and Truex, as this isn't like a Christopher Bell track per se, even though he did crush
Mm.
here in Xfinity. He hasn't done much in the Cup Series. Um, and then Gibbs is just like, man, he was so fast at Bristol, but I didn't think he ever had a shot to win that too. He just doesn't really know how to conserve his tires or something right now. It's just always something he's just kind of fading at the end of the race, even if he is super fast. So I think it's Truex and Hamlin versus Larson and Byron, and may the best man win.
I think that's a good point. I will also note with the Fords, Ryan Blaney did finish third here last year, but even with that, that was their second top 5 in the last 8 races at this track, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that stat's correct there. Brad and Busher also finished 8th and 9th, and that's also good to know because I feel like those RFK drivers, they're always going to finish next to each other. Like they'll be 8 or 9, or they'll be 19th and 20th. But with the sample size we've seen, I think they were a benefit off of the Phoenix pit stop strategy there at the end, and they were able to get a good finish there. But I know at least recently that I've seen this season, those guys really haven't had the speed when it comes to short track racing. So those are I'm a little bit more cautious on them. I think Busher could have a potential better run than Brad, but even then, we're talking top 10. We're not talking outright winners for the Fords in this one. And now let's move on to our outright winners here and see who we got for our best bets. Who are you rocking with to win this one? And I know we mentioned some Toyotas, but give me more of those picks there and why you really feel that way.
So it is Truex and Hamlin as far as the numbers that we have now. I could have got down with Chastain when he opened at like 10 or 11 to 1 places. That I could have done, but that got smoked out so fast that I can't. 8 to 1, I just don't think I can get there because I don't. And the reason is I don't think even if Chastain qualifies well and he's fast in practice, how's he going to improve on 8 to 1 or get, how are the odds going to lessen there? You're still going to have the Larsons, Byrons, Hamlins, Truexes all below him in odds, no matter really what they do in practice or qualifying. So I'll just wait and see. And if Ross is fast, that's one that I could definitely look at. One thing we do have on Win the Race is a practice model, which is nice, especially on some shorter tracks like this, because it will take out, your entry laps or laps in traffic, or it'll even out groups. It does all of that for you. And that's Speed Geeks has created that. That's on their platform, but they're, on Win the Race. That practice model can only be found on our website, but it's really cool because it weeds out all the noise. So I think if Ross is fast, we're going to know. And that's when I'd like to target him then after practice and qualifying. Beforehand, I'll go with, Truex here, who I talked about this on the NASCAR betting preview show right before this. But Truex, the only guys who have a higher win percentage at Dover than Truex is Jimmy Johnson, who's not winning in that LMC car, and Chase Elliott, who's got a 20 less race sample. So he's won 2 of his 11 races or 2 of 13 or whatever it is. I think 2 of 13. So he's like 15% win percentage. Truex has won 12% of the time, which is, that's like basically 7 to 1, which is the number you're getting anyways. and we have it fair at plus 564 in the Sim Center. So I think Truex right now is probably the best bet to win. And he does rank out, number one, the highest win percentage in our sims. And this is something where larger sample size, like he's been good here even since his old furniture row days. So he's always been good at Dover. Won here last year, same tire code as this year. Not much has changed. They get to qualify this year. I think he can qualify well. So yeah, give me some Truex.
I like that. I think it's important to note, like you said, the same tire code as last year. I watched this back. I mentioned that, but one thing that was really key to me was the fact that Martin Truex Jr. was outside of the top 10 at the midway point. 200 laps in, he was outside the top 10. But I really feel like I know they had some pit road struggles as well, but aside from that, he qualified 17th. So he was back there. Well, I guess there wasn't qualifying, but he was still back there in the pack, is what I'm saying. And the fact that he was still able to charge there at the end in stage 3 and get past all those cars, and ultimately, I think it really was a testament to how much he was able to conserve his tires and not have the tire cording or any tire wear that we were seeing on other drivers like Joey Logano or stuff like that. So Martin Truex Jr., I love that pick. We were talking about the Toyotas, right? And here's one driver that I want to see what you feel about him, and that's Ty Gibbs. I do think right now he's 13-1 to win it. I don't really like that number because it would be his first win. And like you mentioned at Bristol, he had it in the bag, and he was 28-1 to win that one. At least I had him for that price at the time, and he did not get it done. He wasn't able to manage his tires or anything like that towards the end. Is this a race where he does have a good enough pit crew where I can sort of see him maybe get up there towards the end and be in position, and he is racing in that Toyota model there? What do you think about Ty Gibbs in this one?
I just like the other guys a little more. Like you said, like
Mm.
when we were talking about Truex, the track here will change as the race goes on. So these guys like Truex, who have raced here over 30 times, I think is going to know a lot more about where to go when the track changes and get there a little quicker. Um, and that's just my thing with, and if there is tire wear, then I obviously like Hamlin and Truex way more than Gibbs. They just take care of their equipment more, and that's just that's a veteran thing. That's just something that they're just naturally good. They're just talented. They just know how to do
Mm-hmm.
it. They're great Hall of Fame drivers. So I don't know. I also have I'm a little biased because we have a bet on Ty Gibbs to not win a race this year. So I already
Oh.
wasted half a unit of that on him, bet for him to win at Coda, and that was close. But I can't. Just me personally, I can't put another dollar on Ty. I just got to hope that he never wins a race. So, um, yeah, I don't know. But mainly the first reasons I said lose all my bias. Yeah, I like these other guys more.
No, that makes sense, and I'm glad that we touched on that because he was a driver that was sort of in my mind early on where I could sort of see him potentially grabbing that one. But I do definitely agree the Truex, the Hamlin, they are obviously they are veteran drivers, but they are just better. They are probably the best in the whole series at conserving their tires. Maybe throw Kyle Larson in there as well, obviously. Christopher Bell as well. I can see him just being better than Ty Gibbs in this one. One driver that I wanted to note on, or before we get to that too, I love what you said about Ross Chastain and the fact that if we see his number go down, it won't go down any much more, really, and compared to what it is right now at a 7-1, 8-1 number after practicing qualifying, because of the drivers that are ahead of him. So I think that is a very strategic play. Everyone else tuning in, be sure to note that, with these guys, we can see that numbers change after practice and qualifying. And I think for the Toyota specifically, that's been something that I've been noting, and maybe it's changed a little bit recently, but they were not that good at qualifying earlier on in the year. So I would wait on someone like a Martin Truex Jr. or even a Denny Hamlin. And if they qualify outside the top 10 and still have a good shot of winning, the number would increase post practice and qualifying. Is there
I think
anyone out there? Yeah, go for it.
I think the books are in tune with like JGR kind of tanking practice and qualifying sometimes now. Like Denny's famous for it. He'll go out there and be like, I don't know, fifth or sixth in practice times, and then go out there and qualify 14th. And then like you're
Right.
10 laps into a race and he's passed 10 cars. So you're like, okay, then that was all BS. So but I think the books kind of know that now because even when Denny has those runs in practice and qualifying, he's still listed as one of the favorites. So but if Chastain has one of those bad practice in qualifying, one, you're going to be so mad that you bet him to win at 8-1 anyways. But, you might as well just wait, because what if he's fast in practice but bad in qualifying? Then they could lay a number 13, 14 to 1, something like that, and you can think he can run through the field like he has here before, and bet him then. So I don't know. There's different avenues where you won't get those with the other favorites.
I think on the opposite end of that, right, a driver that is listed right now as a value play, at least for my eyes, right, that could go out and outright win this with the equipment that he's in. I think on the opposite end, he could potentially qualify well, practice even better, and then his number could be cut in half when it comes time to race day. That's Alex Bowman at 16 to 1. What do you think about that? Because I could see him. I mean, he has five top five finishes in the last 6 races here. Didn't race in this race last season because he was out with injury, but he did put it on the pole one of these past couple races a year ago. So, what are your thoughts about him? Could this be a value play to hop on Alex Bowman earlier in the week compared to later on?
Yeah, Bowman is one I know that, like, Greg at Win the Race has ladder bet. So that means, for anyone new to betting, means like you take the top 5 or top 10, 5, 3, and win, or any part of that ladder that you feel comfortable with. And it's really just you're banking on upside. You wouldn't bet the same amount on every bet, because as you get closer to winner, you're going to win more, so you can bet a little less. But I know he's on it. And if you believe in HMS this weekend, which you really should, they have been best here, recent form. They've been better than JGR if you just look at the numbers, top fives, all that stuff. Um, so yeah, Bowman is definitely in play. And you're right, because if he goes out and he practices really well and qualifies top 5, that number is down to 7 or 8 to 1. So it is the opposite of what we said about Chastain. It's one you would want to get now. What I'd be hesitant about is that in this intermediate package, he has not looked great. So I just don't know. I don't know. Like, it's been clear cut that Larson and Byron are the two, alphas on the team. And then they have 2 more cars. And sometimes they can pop, but like I said with Elliott, he had to get lucky with strategy to be up there and win a race. In my opinion, he was fast,
Mm-hmm.
but those luck. I still thought Hamlin could have beat him too. Reddick had the best car that day, but I don't know. Yeah, I agree. Long story short, I agree. That number could get cut in half if you practice to qualify as well. So if you like Bowman, I would take it now.
Sounds good there. And I definitely agree about that Chase Elliott. I had Tyler Reddick for Texas, and that was a tough one to see Chase up there, put him 3 wide. He was aggressive, so I'll give him that. Like, it was an aggressive move that gave him, the win and the lead at that time. But Reddick was the good long run core. I was seeing him with 30 laps to go, and he was driving away, even past Denny Hamlin after Denny passed him on pit road. So that one hurt.
Mhm.
That one hurt. And then he goes
Yeah.
out and wins Talladega. So I was 1 week early. But all right, any other outright winners you got on the board, whether it's long shots or favorites? I know we talked about Truex and Hamlin, but anything else you got for us there?
No, I'm waiting. Like I said, I like the Truex and Hamlin right now where they're at, 'cause I don't see them moving. And then I'd probably wait on Chastain. And if you like Bowman, like you said, that's a good one to grab early.
Perfect. And now, so with that being said, let's switch over to some prop bets. From the top 10 market, for me personally, I couldn't really find anything that I liked or that's really stood out for me the most. My biggest one, I'll lead us off here, was Josh Berry plus 200 for a top 10. He hasn't, I mean, Martinsville to me was a track where I wanted him to get a top 10. I was on him to be the top 4 and everything like that. And the pit crew just ruined his entire day. So I can see that happening again. And that's what gets me a little bit scared, but I still like that plus 200 number for Barry. What are your thoughts about him and potentially any other guys out there on the board for top 10s?
Yeah, I mean, I like Barry. If there's one track to believe in him, I think it's here. In Xfinity, I feel like he finished second or won the race every single time. So definitely good here. Finished top 10 here last year in an HMS car. So, that's probably a better ride than he'll have this weekend. But maybe he's got more experience in the car now. And, he didn't really have any last time. So, yeah, maybe he can put it together. I don't mind that number at all. Um, I took Tyler Reddick, so we just mentioned him and how fast he's been in this package. If people have access to Fanatics, he's plus 130 for a top 10. He actually opened plus 150 there for a top 10, so I have a little bit of that. But you think like everything we've mentioned so far about Reddick, the speed in this intermediate package this year has been dominant, but minus the Bristol race where a lot of people had problems at Bristol. No one really expected those tires to do that. But you get somewhere, where you can expect something out of the tire. Like we said, same tire code as last year. They're very familiar with it. They didn't qualify, but he still started seventh last year, ran over 50% of his laps inside the top 10, and finished seventh. So he was always there. So I'd say the only difference between last year and this year is that Tyler Reddick's better this year. So give him a chance to qualify. Maybe he can go down, put a hot lap down. But even if he doesn't and he qualifies outside the top 10, I think that car definitely has top 10 speed more times than not. And he should be good. So yeah, Tyler Reddick plus 130 is my favorite top 10 right now.
I like that. And I like that especially because that just shows and encourages everyone out there tuning in to shop around, like we mentioned, because on DraftKings specifically, I'm looking at Tyler Reddick here, minus 120. So if you can get him at plus 130, by all means, that's something that I would jump on if I was, looking at that book as well. Fanatics, you said it was on, right?
Yes.
Awesome. So, and Tyler Reddick, to your point as well, I think that he is like an extremely good driver, and maybe that's stating the obvious, but the fact that he's been able to get better on these shorter tracks, that it seemed to be that was like his sort of Achilles heel, or maybe the only places where okay, Tyler Reddick would struggle a little bit there, because he did last season. We've seen him now at Martinsville get a top 10 finish. He's been racing up there at other sort of, Phoenix was another one as well, where maybe he's been good. Yeah,
he has 7 top 10s in the 10 races. He's good.
that's
He's just
insane.
improving everywhere. Yeah. So
Yeah,
he's
and
the
even super
consistency there
speedways.
too. Yeah,
Yes,
that's what I
yes.
mean. So same thing you're saying. He's improving everywhere, and just more time with his 23XI team and 2311, whatever people want to call it. And yeah, I don't know, man. I think just like you're saying, the young guys who spend a lot of time, in the sim and stuff like that, has really seemed to be paying off. Him and Byron especially just are two studs. So yeah, I love it.
I would say at the beginning of the year, I was looking at these drivers, and it was like Kyle Larson and William Byron, they're 1, 2, Denny Hamlin 3, and I was sort of searching for a guy that would fill that fourth role in just terms of like just best drivers in the sport right now in terms of the series and week in and week out. And I think Tyler Reddick is right there. I think he's number 4, and 7 top 10s in the last 10. I did not know that stat, and that just shows how consistent he's been. And compared to all these other drivers, where it's like Kyle Larson, yes, he's a favorite every week and going out and can dominate probably any track, but if he's not doing that, he's wrecking out. So it's like we want someone there that's consistent.
Yeah, and one thing too, you did mention like for Barry's pit crew that they could, potentially screw him a little bit. Tyler Reddick's, they did screw him uh in the race he could have won. But for the overall view of the year, that was the only race they were really bad. Actually, because I do the 4 tire pit stops for all races except for drafting tracks, there's like 4 or 5 dominant teams, and Reddick's just beyond that 7th overall. And that's with his terrible score when they lost in the race. So one dud week out of, I don't know, I think I've done, so I've had 3 drafting tracks. So that's out of 7
Mhm.
races. So one dud out of 7 races. The other 6 have been great for a 7th best overall. I guess you could call it like 4 tire pit stop rank that I have for the field. So more times than not, Tyler Reddick's crew is not going to screw him over. And I like that too on a race like this.
That's actually really good to know, especially considering in the late stages of Dover where track position is very much key. And we don't really see, okay, so from that exact point here, what about Martin Truex Jr.'s crew? Because I feel like at times, or at least we saw it at Richmond specifically, where, I wouldn't even say that was a bad stop, but Denny Hamlin's team was just better. Where does he rank in that sort of same aspect?
Truex is 3, 6, 9, like 12th.
Okay, so not that
So
bad,
yeah,
but
it's
not
not
better than
it's
Reddick.
not bad. Yeah, he has like, so where Reddick has 1 dud week, Truex had 2 dud weeks out of the
Okay.
7. So nothing terrible.
But definitely good to know, especially considering now we're going to a place where we could see a maybe a caution comes out, a crucial pit stop, but a money stop as they call it, and maybe Reddick Screw with him being up there in the top 10 could give him a couple positions, or even Hamlin there at the end. Yeah, I like that as well. So I just want to keep going off some props here. Another one for a top 5. I mentioned him before, but that'd be Alex Bowman. I have at plus 200 for a top 5 finish. I just think the value there is good, especially considering, like we mentioned earlier, that number will go down if he does qualify well at this track. I mean, I especially like it too if he gets a position starting inside the top 10, for him just to sort of maintain that track position throughout the day. With this being one of his better tracks, and him needing to keep getting consistently good finishes, with him not winning races, with him not being with him being the least dominant car at HMS, I think a top 5 here is something that he'll be hungry to get. Is that something you consider as well?
Yeah, I think, and like I said, Greg, I know, is on this as well. He laddered him up, which did include his top 5 price. So, I think Greg wrote that up on. He might have wrote it up on our site, but I can send you the link or whatever, and you can post it in the description of this. And yeah, he wrote a whole blurb about it. And if Greg's on it, like I said, then yeah, I can get down with it. It's just a matter of, like you said, like getting the best number. So plus
Mhm.
200. I can actually look at the Sim Center while we have it up here and just see if there's anything better out there quickly. Like on MGM, you can get him top 5 plus 275.
Oh, there you go. Let's go.
So yeah, so that's the other benefit of the Sim Center on Win the Race too, is like if you are trying, it's like an instant shop around. You could just pop it in there, top 10 finish, Alex Bowman, boom, all the numbers are up from all the books that are loaded in there.
That's perfect. And so, going off that, is there any ones that you see for whether it's top 5, top 3? What are some of your favorite props there in this one?
Yeah, so one that rates out the best for us right now is Denny Hamlin top 5 plus 140. I don't know if that's still available, so I'm sorry that if it's not, to anyone listening to this, but plus 140, we have it fair at plus 105. And just one thing about Denny Hamlin is, like, he hasn't had a ton of top 5s here, but he has been running in the top 5 a ton. I mean, he just has, like, the worst luck in the world. So, I don't know. I don't wanna bet like that. I wanna bet on just the numbers that I know and I see, and that's just kinda how I'm gonna roll with it. I think Denny's in one of the best spots he's ever been in this year, where he could win a championship, and I think he can
Mhm.
win almost any week he goes out there at any track. Um, but he was number 1 in true performance ranks in this package all last year. He had 9 out of the
Right.
16 performances were true performance inside the top 5, which was more than anyone. Or Byron had 12, I think, and Hamlin had 9. So Hamlin was second there. He's number 1 in true performance ranks in the intermediate package this year so far. Um, I just, I don't know. I think this is Denny's time. He only has the one win here, but that's fairly recently at this track, with a couple more top 5s over the last couple years or 3 or 4 years. I think he had one last year, finished 5th, and then couple years before that. But if you look at the stage finishes, he is running up front. Just things go wrong. So plus 140 for a top 5, I thought was a little silly. And we mentioned pit crews. His pit crew's
Mhm.
unreal. There's only a couple HMS guys that rank ahead of him in my ranks for pit crews. So yeah, give me Denny Hamlin plus 140 top 5.
I like that. I like that a lot. Denny is strong wherever we go, like you mentioned, and that just that having him, like, Denny's always a driver that races with confidence, I feel like, and aggression, but it's controlled aggression. So with him now having confidence from having one of his better starts to any of the years in his career thus far, with him, like you said, being able to win on any type of track, I think that's going to bode well going into this race specifically. In terms of any of the top team props or top race driver props that I have or that I've seen. We talked about Alex Bowman. He was one of them. We won't talk about him anymore because anything Alex Bowman early in the week, just bet on it. And Josh Berry was one that I saw for top Ford. He's 12-1 for that. I think that's a little risky just because Ryan Blaney is in the mix. I think Blaney can go out and have a strong day here. And we also mentioned the RFK drivers, but realistically, with Josh Berry finishing inside the top 10 at this track last season, we talked about how good he is at this track specifically when it came to Xfinity, and now him having more time in the Cup car. Is that in terms of value, 12-1 top four for Josh Berry? Is that somewhere you would see happening, or something that you may be betting on?
Yeah, we have actually in the Sim Center, we have it fair at plus 978. So pretty decent value on that there at 12-1. And like we said earlier with Barry, in the Xfinity series, he's excellent here. And then he has a top 10 here in the Cup series and now has more experience in this car. So yeah, it could happen. And I mean, Blaney is good. He finished third here last year. But if you look at all the starts before that, none of them are top tens. Like, I think you have to go way back in order to find another Ryan Blaney top 10. So then you got what the RFK guys, maybe they can they typically, like you said earlier too, they finish better than they race. They just have this like, somehow they magically know the perfect strategy and they can find these finishes. Never well, not for Keselowski, you can never win anything. Sorry to
Yeah.
say that after what happened to you last week.
It's true.
Bad time, too soon. But yeah, I don't know, man. I could see it 12-1. That would probably be a bet I'll sprinkle something on.
Awesome. Yeah, I think so too. And just to stick on the Fords real quick too, I just feel like with their inconsistency so far this year, like honestly, I think I potentially trust Stewart Haas Racing the most, and that's a crazy thing to say, but I just feel like they've been consistently hovering inside the top 10. Briscoe's had some strong top 5 runs, and I'm not saying they're better than Blaney or Logano or Team Penske in general. I mean, definitely better than Cindric, but but when it comes to that sort of thing, I just feel like they've just been having more consistent speed. Whether if they're racing from 10th to 18th, they're there every week in, week out, right? Like Team Penske, you see Logano and Blaney maybe have a shot to win a race. I wouldn't even say win a race, but maybe top 5 strong run, put themselves close to contention, or the next week they're just out of it. They're just like getting lapped or potentially just not even in the
Yeah.
mix. So I think that's important to note as
They're
well.
racing where Austin Cindric is racing.
Yeah, which he's always racing there.
Yeah, at least he's consistent.
Yeah. The one driver we can count on is Cindric to be outside of the top 10 every week. So going off of one of our favorite guys there, Nelson Cindric, who I mean, he's just hasn't been able to turn things around. We'll see if he ever can. But sort of finishing things off here on a positive note, just going off of everything that we've talked about thus far, maybe anything that we haven't touched on that you want to get in now towards the end. What are some of your favorite plays heading into the weekend?
One thing that I mentioned on the NASCAR betting preview show earlier is a head-to-head, and we talked about Reddick a ton here. So don't want to beat a dead horse, but minus 115 over Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch, to me, like I I understand he was awesome here with JGR for all those years, but as soon as he goes to RCR, he gets the pole through the formula or whatever, and can't even finish top 20. Meanwhile, Reddick starts 7th. Like I said, ran on most of his laps inside the top 10, finishes 7th. Just pretty good model of consistency for that race. You bring the same tire code back this year. I think Reddick's even stronger. Could argue Kyle Busch in the intermediate package last year. I mean, he won a couple races. This year, garbage. I mean, he's fast at a couple races, but just the finishes are just never there. So a head to head at minus 115, I'll take Reddick over that, and I think that's probably my favorite play as of right now.
I like that too, especially with how like you just RCR is so far off, and if Kyle Busch is going to be the driver that could pull him out of the mud, but the fact that he has to do that and B drive his own car, like you said, and drive their car too, that is doing that. I completely agree. I don't like Kyle Busch, and like it's tough to say because I think there are some tracks that he could win at, but lately the speed that they've had has just been not there like at all. So it'd be one thing. I'm laying off of Kyle Busch, and I get this question a lot. I feel like where it's like, oh, Kyle Busch for 15-1 or whatever case may be, 17-1. Like that's great value for Kyle Busch. Yeah, it is, but not for the car that he's driving now. Like I need this team to sort of prove it to me in order to make myself confident in betting on them. So I agree with that one for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the other thing too would be his pit crew, like the first like 4 weeks of the year, they were just switching bodies around there, just trying to figure it out. It's just like a lot of what's going on in that organization just seems a little off right now. So I don't know. He's gonna have to show me something. Even if he has what I would call a great run for Kyle Busch right now would be like a ninth or 10th place finish. And even if he does that, I think Reddick can beat him. So I love this matchup.
Yeah, let's go. All right, well, that sounds good. I think for my favorite play, it would have to be this is a tough one. Maybe a Ross Chastain top 5 finish. I know that we talked about Ross Chastain a little bit, but I think he's plus 100 for that, at least on DraftKings. I'm sure you could find a little bit better value out there somewhere else. But I just like the speed that Ross has brought. I like the fact that he was able to chase down William Byron there when he was leading at the start of last year's race here. But is there anything else you want to give out? I appreciate you coming on, everything like that, and you've definitely gave a lot of great insight as well. So I hope everyone else tuning in has been writing it down and locking in these bets as we go on.
No, I appreciate it, man. I think that pretty much covers everybody. Like, there's on with the way odds are nowadays, there's only so much we can do pre-practice and qualifying. The odds are pretty tight, so you have to really dive and search for value, and you also have to be pretty quick. Some of these numbers we're lucky you're still around, but a lot of times you got to be on there within like the first hour of these numbers dropping to pounce on them, and then they drop like crazy fast. So no, I think we're good right now. Let's wait and see what happens in practice and qualifying. We use the practice model on Win the Race and follow the speed. And that'll be what's most important.
Awesome. Everyone be sure to tune in to Win the Race as well as they continue Ryan and Greg and all the other guys that are on the team and the Sim Center and everything they got going on has been instrumental for a lot of NASCAR bettors out there. And especially after practice and qualifying, like he said, that's where a lot of the odds may change and the value you will see on the boards will go up or down. So be sure to tune in there. Be sure to follow him everywhere. Where can people follow you? And be sure to stay tuned into all your content as well.
You can follow me on X at Win the Race P1, and the website is WinTheRace.info. So check us out. Hope to see you in there.
Guys, that'll do it for this week's episode of Through the Gears. I hope you are now prepared for Dover as we head into the Monster Mile and we can capitalize on some of those values that we talked about in the show. Big shout out to Ryan Stevens for coming on the program and a big shout out to Win the Race as well. Be sure to check them out if you haven't already. Tons of great content over there and tons of great racing insights that I know I use on a daily basis throughout the week to help me perform better. If I could get an edge anywhere in my research or preparation, I'm willing to do so in order so that I can get the best picks and the best bets out there for you guys to make the most money possible. So shout out to them for helping us be able to do just that. Let us know who you think is going to win the race this weekend. Comment below. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow along to the Front Stretch Podcast Network. It's not just Through the Gears. There's tons of other great programs out there to get you ready for this race weekend. And once the race is over, tune into the Stock Car Scoop as they give you a great analysis and breakdown of everything that happened from Dover Motor Speedway and beyond as we continue on throughout this NASCAR season. I'm Tino Pattigno. You can follow me at TinoPattigno, and I'll see you guys next week as we go through the gears.